My people are not boss out to Eritrea president of the Republic of Eritrea. He don't put a come outside for African leaders. They're not supposed to celebrate, see what they don't do for their country, where Africa is one of the most poorest continents in the universe. My people, I don't want to talk too much. I want to watch this video. I want to comment your opinion after watching. Hit the like button and share. Make sure you share the video because right about now, it's about to get down.
Isaias Afwerki, the president of Eritrea, is called the founding father of the modern Eritrean state. However, in the Western world, he is known as a dictator and an authoritarian leader who does not listen to them. Well, the West defines him by judging his conduct with them. Since he keeps them in their place and looks them in the eye, they feel a need to replace him, but sadly, they cannot. It turns out that his personality and boldness are contagious, as he is questioning and embarrassing African leaders on what they are doing. Recently, the African Climate Summit took place, where he did not want to go. But he came to say something which nobody there will ever forget, and perhaps, after this, there will be no other climate summit at all. Taking the mic, he exposed how African leaders have engaged themselves in time-wasting activities when people in Africa die of hunger and poverty. What he said reverberated in the minds, ushering in boldness that was desperately needed in African leaders. But did he say, and how he has created shockwaves for the Western world? Let's find out. The African countries' leaders were present at the African Climate Summit, where Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki was about to give one of his controversial and bold speeches. In a true sense, it was not controversial. He spoke what he had in mind, and that created a greater sound. His remarks were aimed at the African leaders present there, who thought they were solving practical issues by being there. They did not expect that they would be criticized in the staunchest way possible, besides the good beating of the Western world by Eritrea's president. He started his remarks by saying that he could not understand the real reason why African leaders were there in the first place. He continued and said that leaders come there to talk about their achievements and win some fame, and then they go back to their countries. He said that he would not do this. He would not talk about his and his country's achievements because it was useless and a waste of time. He stressed focusing on the real issues almost all African countries are struggling with, like being exploited by the Western world. However, he said that instead of talking about this and offering practical solutions on how to end that, leaders come into the summits and promote their achievements, engaging in public relations exercises. He said that this cycle has to stop if African leaders want their countries to come to a solution. He talked about African resources, saying that the continent has more resources than any other. Hence, why do African leaders talk about exporting more of them to Europe and other countries when they can benefit from them? Why cannot they mobilize those resources, instead of offering them at cheap prices to the Western world and earning only pennies? Clearly, he was talking rationally, trying to explain the problem in the simplest words possible. He was doing so as if he were talking to some children because he believed African leaders should be taught the basics of how to run their countries. He asked again and again whether they had a solution to mobilize their resources. If yes, they must work on it and don't expect charities from the Western world. He asked collectively whether they are using their resources for the development of their countries and to solve climate issues. How could they talk about climate and problems which the Western world thinks should be solved first? When they could not even take care of their resources, how could they jump onto climate issues which should be resolved when hunger and poverty have been solved? His every word made the African leaders focus on what they had been doing wrong. They were silent, confessing that they did not do anything about it. He ordered the African leaders not to divert their focus on non-issues and to care about the problems which are weakening Africa. Interestingly, he asked them to do their homework and come up with proper definitions of their problems, goals, and objectives. He said that African leaders must do whatever they want with their resources, but it must be their plans. The strategies should not come from the West at all. Otherwise, he said that he did not want to waste their and his own time talking about achievements and non-issues. As he stopped, the whole hall was reverberating with clappings of the African leaders. Continuing, he said that if African leaders are accepting hundreds of billions of dollars from the Western world, it means they are inviting them to interfere. Western countries are not kind to offer billions of dollars and take nothing in return. He said that African countries have to put in place non-corrupt governments, so there is no need for a private sector. Isaias Afwerki has appeared as the African leader who can unite all others in Africa, making the most powerful organization in the world. Many already know him, but there is a lot that stayed hidden, which you should know about. Isaias Afwerki was born on February 2, 1946, in the Abba Shi'aul district of Asmara, Eritrea. He's a prominent Eritrean politician who has held the position of president since shortly after leading the Eritrean People's Liberation Front to victory on May 24, 1991, effectively ending a 30-year war for independence from Ethiopia. In addition to his presidential role, Isaias has also served as the chairman of Eritrea's sole legal political party, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. Notably, Eritrea has never established a functional constitution, held elections, maintained a legislative body, or disclosed a public budget. Consequently, Isaias has been the sole wielder of power in the nation. commanding both its judiciary and military. Since he holds so much power, he becomes a threat to the Western world. Hence, the West launched propaganda against him. West-paid scholars and historians categorize him as a dictator, with his regime often characterized as totalitarian due to practices such as forced conscription. The United Nations, the US lapdog, and Amnesty International have raised concerns about human rights violations under his rule. Isaias's journey began with his schooling at Prince Makanan High School. In the early 1960s, he became involved in the Eritrean student movement. In 1965, he started his college studies at the College of Engineering at Haile Selassie I University, which is now Addis Ababa University in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. However, in September 1966, Isaias made a climactic decision to leave university and join the Eritrean Liberation Front. In 1967, the Chinese government provided support to ELF combatants, including light weapons, funds for transportation, and training. Isaias was among the first groups sent to China in 1967 for military training. Upon his return, he took on the role of political commissioner for the ELF's Zone 5 in the Hamashian region. Isaias played a crucial role in the grassroots movement that ultimately led to the dismantling of the ELF's zonal divisions. He also played a central role in the Tripartite Union, which challenged the ELF's leadership, the Supreme Council, and the Revolutionary Command. Following sectarian violence in the early 1970s against members of the Reform movement, Isaias, along with others in the Central Highlands, withdrew to an isolated area near Dekamare called Ala. There they joined Abraham Tewolde, the former commander of the now-defunct Zone 5. After Tewolde died in battle, Isaias assumed leadership. In August 1971, a group of junior ELF members founded Selfie Natsinet, which later became known as the Eritrean People's Liberation Front. Isaias was elected as one of its 5 leaders. In 1977, EPLF held its first Congress, electing Isaias as Vice Secretary General. During the Second Congress in 1987, he rose to the position of Secretary General. When the Ethiopian Civil War ended in May 1991, he became Secretary General of the Provisional Government of Eritrea. In April 1993, a UN-supervised referendum on independence took place, leading to Eritrea's official independence. Isaias was elected as the President of the State of Eritrea by the National Assembly and became the first head of state, a position he has held ever since the end of the war for independence. In February 1994, the EPLF transitioned into a political party called the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, with Isaias being elected Secretary General. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Isaias received praise as a new kind of African leader, with then U.S. President Bill Clinton referring to him as a Renaissance African leader. The U.S. did not know that this leader would challenge it and become the most powerful leader, much like Muammar Gaddafi. He started strengthening his position, making it impossible for the West to replace him with a puppet president. In a notable statement, when asked about elections in 2010, Isaias responded, "Let's wait 3 or 4 decades." In 2018, there was a significant shift in Eritrea's relations with Ethiopia. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed negotiated an end to the border conflict between the two countries, leading to the re-establishment of diplomatic and commercial ties. The two leaders signed a peace declaration in July 2018, ending the war between their nations and outlining a framework for bilateral cooperation. This historic development earned Isaias international recognition, with the UAE government awarding him the Order of Zayed for his efforts to bring about peace. To understand how powerful Isaias Afwerki and Eritrea are, you should know that Eritrea was one of the 4 countries that voted against a United Nations General Assembly resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The other 3 were Belarus, Syria, and North Korea. In July 2023, Afwerki attended the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg and met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That's what makes the West terrified of him. They know strong Isaias Afwerki is in Eritrea, with no chance of his removal from either coup or replacement with a puppet president. On May 24, 1993, Eritrea achieved its independence from Ethiopia through a United Nations-backed referendum that garnered a staggering 99.8% support from the Eritrean populace in favor of independence. Following this historic moment, Isaias Afwerki ascended to the role of President of Eritrea after successfully defeating the authoritarian Derg government during the Ethiopian Civil War, which spanned from 1974 to 1991. As of now, Isaias Afwerki is the only president of Eritrea since its independence. Under his rule, Eritrea transformed into a one-party state, something which the West hated as they could not control Isaias Afwerki. Eritrea's political terrain, according to a 2019 report by the U.S. State Department, transformed into a centralized totalitarian state under President Isaias Afwerki after a 1997 constitution was left unimplemented. Well, you can see how the West just cannot bear him. Fighting under the banner of democracy, sprinkling the spices of human rights violations, and accusing Isaias Afwerki of being a dictator, they tried everything to replace him, but all in vain. Eritrea is rich in resources, and whatever Isaias Afwerki said at the summit will be applied there to present a model. Eritrea, situated in the Horn of Africa, shares borders with Ethiopia, Sudan, and Djibouti. It boasts a coastline along the Red Sea, and encompasses a total land area of 45,406 square miles. Eritrea's formation involved the amalgamation of several distinct kingdoms and sultanates, including Ausa, Bari, and Medri. Eritrea possesses substantial untapped mineral deposits which Isaias Afwerki plans to benefit from once he has set the strategy. He could call Western companies to exploit Eritrea's resources and pay him a little, but he did not. That's why he preached kicking out Western companies and becoming independent in benefiting from resources at the summit. Whatever he said is what he is doing for his own country. Geological studies and remote sensing investigations have confirmed the presence of significant mineral resources in Eritrea. These resources include gold, zinc, copper, oil, potash, limestone, gypsum, iron ore, and natural gas. Eritrea's Greenbelt, which hosts valuable bases and precious metals, covers approximately 70% of the nation's territory. However, the exact quantity of mineral reserves remains unknown due to insufficient mining infrastructure. As of 2017, Eritrea has licensed 10 mining companies to prospect for various minerals. If only one full-scale mining operation is started, Eritrea will produce around 350,000 ounces of gold annually, until the resource is depleted. Additionally, the potash mine in the Danakil Depression has the potential to produce 10,000 tons per day for approximately 150 years. Eritrea is believed to possess significant oil and gas reserves too. The resources remain largely untapped for the same reason of not allowing Western companies to exploit Eritrea's resources. The Eritrean Red Sea Basin, covering approximately 125,000 square kilometers, holds the potential for oil and gas deposits. For now, to fulfill its need, Eritrea has drilled only 11 offshore wells since 1921, keeping all others in backup. As of now, agriculture is a significant employer in Eritrea, engaging nearly 80% of the population. The adoption of modern farming practices has contributed to the sector's growth, but the availability of fertile arable land is a primary factor. Eritrea boasts extensive tracts of fertile arable land stretching from west to east toward the desert. Most arable land is dedicated to cereal production, including wheat, millet, sorghum, beans, barley, and lentils. Isaias Afwerki has been vocal about how he wants to develop Eritrea, following his own strategy. Whatever he said at the African Climate Summit is actually what he himself follows. His country and his struggle are examples of how he plans to make Eritrea a model state for Africa to see and learn from. At the summit, he debunked the myth of climate change, stressing the fact that this is a problem for those countries which have already dealt with their immediate problems. But for Africa, where people find it hard to put food on the table, how can the world expect it to care about climate? Well, that's how things have been in the world for decades. The Western world traces the problems which they think are problems. Other countries are told to do whatever they can to solve them. But has any country ever paused and thought for a moment on the fact that why is it following policies given by the West? Perhaps it's bitter to confess that African leaders at the climate summit were trying to show superficially how they cared about the problems the West thought important. But what about the grave issues Africa is coping with? Will European countries and the US do summits in their countries on how not to exploit Africa's resources? Well, the answer is no. At the summit, he said the very basic things African leaders need to do. Instead of wasting time on useless matters, he asked them to establish robust systems for overseeing and supervising their natural resources. This includes implementing transparent and accountable procedures for resource extraction, revenue collection, and expenditure. Instead of calling Western companies to do something simple like that, African countries should be independent in carrying out all operations. Isaias Afwerki said that African leaders should simply give up the possibility of making any agreements with European companies. No matter how much money they are offered, they must strongly reject it, as accepting would bind them to strategic exploitation. Then, it will be nearly impossible for them to get rid of those companies. He also said that instead of simply exporting raw materials, African countries can invest in industries that add value, such as processing and manufacturing. This not only enhances the value of their resources, but also generates local employment opportunities. Governments can offer incentives to industries that enhance the value of natural resources. Investing in critical infrastructure such as roads, ports, and energy supply is vital for unlocking the potential of resource-rich regions. Adequate infrastructure reduces the costs associated with resource extraction and transportation, rendering industries more competitive. Further, Africa should diversify its economy, as over-reliance on resource exports exposes countries to fluctuations in global markets. African leaders should pursue economic diversification by developing other sectors like agriculture, technology, and services to reduce dependence on resource exports. In addition to that, African leaders should end corruption, as it can undermine efforts to benefit from resources. African leaders should implement stringent anti-corruption measures and ensure that resource revenues are used for the greater public good rather than being misappropriated by corrupt officials. Isn't it true that Africa should delay the climate summits and first care about its immediate issues? Do you feel that the Western world tries to set what problems should be solved by Africa, leaving the ones that are weakening it? Let us know what you think about Isaias Afwerki's remarks at the climate summit. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious blacks have been.